Hello chess fans, today I wanted to look at a game between Nigel Short and Fabiano Caruana, in which Fabiano Caruana does a great job of showing why the space advantage is so important in chess. So we see the game starts off with the unusual move b4, which is called a Polish opening, and usually the refutation given by most grandmasters is to go e5, and after bishop d2 to simply take the pawn, and after bishop takes go knight f6, and here black is up on development and will eventually get another tempo on this bishop, and black is considered to be either slightly better or at least equal. Instead, Fabiano Caruana goes for d5, a more principled response, as usually you do not want to give up center pawns. In this specific case it is okay. Bishop b2, knight f6, developing pieces. And here we see that Fabiano Caruana opts for a London setup, which can be done if you don't really know what your opponent is going for. Many unusual openings that don't arise after e4, you can simply respond to with a London setup. Bishop e2, e6, a3, defending the pawn finally. If you're wondering, it couldn't have been taken all this time because the e-pawn wasn't here. So defending the pawn, bishop e7, developing. Here, Fabiano Caruana plays h6, a sort of preparatory move for after knight f3, knight h4 would sometimes win the bishop pair, and sometimes there's ideas like h4 to threaten g4 and to trap the bishop, especially with the queen and bishop lined up like this. So knight d2, a little bit of a strange move. Why knight f3 wasn't played is beyond me. Probably white wanted to play e4, but right now there's too much people covering that. Knight bd7, knight gf3, castles, h3, just another preparatory move, maybe threatening g4, not prepared to castle quite yet. Here white should have relatively equalized the game, but Fabiano Caruana likely did not want to go into their opponent's prep. And here we see bishop g6, so expecting that e4 will come into position and automatically getting out of the way of that. Bishop h7 could have also been considered. Knight b3 looking at c4 and d5, and here we see what the first step is, just simply to improve your pieces to try to take more space. We can see that white has this small center sort of setup, and the bishop is pretty nice, and this bishop is pretty bad. And black pretty much has all their pieces on pretty good squares, except for this bishop, which is now we're going to put on d6 and try to go for c6 and e5 and have complete control of the center. So the first step is to get control of the center. And Nigel decides to allow this and go for g4, look for compensation on the other side of the board. A common saying in chess is if your opponent attacks in the center, try to meet your opponent at the flanks. In this case, it's not very good because we know pawns in the center are worth the most, and a central thrust is worth the most in the game of chess. So e5 here we see advancing the pawn. Notice c6 didn't need to be played yet because there's no attack here. Knight h4 threatening the bishop. Bishop h7. This is maybe why the bishop should have gone to h7 earlier. Knight f5, we see knight bishop takes, g takes, and here Fabiano Caruana just does not care about the attack like many of us probably would be scared of the g file. There's simply no attack here, and he continues with rook e8, just simply developing and preparing to break in the center. And we notice that the entire queen side is going to crumble after the move c5, and the king has no safe haven on the king side or the queen side at that point. So rook g1, and here Fabiano decides to strike. Here we see this finally that the center is going to explode in Fabiano's favor, and these bishops are just absolutely horrible even though black has the bishop pair. Knight takes, knight takes, knight takes. Bishop f1, looking to remove the bishop from this diagonal and put it on the long diagonal, but this is too little too late because after rook c8 there's just immense pressure on the position. Nigel decides to go queen d2, and already the engine is calling for a very ugly move, which is c3. Obviously no one would want to play this, but queen d2 an inaccuracy. Bishop b6 looking for bishop a5 and forcing c3. King d1 to get out of that pin. Bishop a5. c3 is forced pretty much because the queen doesn't want to move and allow something like bishop c3 and the eventual pile up with d4 as well. King h8, getting out of the way, preparing some defense if this was ever needed. For example, if f4, queen g2 comes, now rook g8 is a possibility. f3, Nigel goes for that plan. What they had to do was get out of the way with queen c2 to get out of this pin, because after f3, Fabiano immediately strikes with d4, taking advantage of the pin on the piece. And here we see that completely Fabiano is winning by simply just ignoring what their opponent was doing. This king had no safe haven, and Fabiano has achieved a great advantage. So after queen g2 attacking, we see rook g8, the idea of king h8. C takes d4, and we see knight d5, not worrying about material because the king is the most important thing in chess. And here we see Fabiano develops another initiative. This position is completely winning. After queen f2, we see another very nice move, queen b6, threatening to take and take here, at which point it would be over because the rook would be trapped. bishop e2, there was simply nothing they could do about that. But probably what Nigel thought would happen with Fabiano would take here, and then okay, they'd probably just resign the game after this because this and this are threatened. But instead, Fabiano unleashed a very nice move here, queen b3 with mate. The bishop covers this, the rook covers this, and the bishop that just moved there covers the king's final escape square. So that's the end of today's video, guys. I hope this is an illustrative example of how you use the space advantage to your advantage. As we saw in this game, what Fabiano did was he simply ignored what his opponent was doing on the sides of the board. He just allowed himself to defend himself and looked to break on the center and the queen side where he was the strongest. That's the end of today's video, guys. I will see you guys in the next one.